is Sophia Edwards-Knox, and I'm the chair of the Digital Media and Communication Department at COSTAATT's Ken Gordon School of Journalism. Well, what used to be School of Journalism, it's now the Ken Gordon School of Communication, Creative and Digital Media. You may know us as, or historically as, the Ken Gordon School of Journalism and Communication Studies, but it's the same thing, right? So today, your presenter for this broadcast news writing workshop is Mr. Anil Seerattan, who has been a journalist for almost 20 years and an educator for 12 years. He holds a master's degree in communication, media, and public relations, and a bachelor's degree in education. Mr. Seerattan is currently the news director at one of the top radio networks in Trinidad and Tobago. He also lectures at COSTAATT in journalism, media, and communication, and has trained many of the established journalists and other media professionals in the industry today. I now hand you over to my colleague, Mr. Anil Seerattan, who will facilitate today's workshop.
Good morning again, everyone, and thank you, Sophia, for the introduction. As she mentioned, my name is Anil Seerattan, and I'll be your facilitator for today's broadcast news writing workshop. I don't think there's much to say in terms of the introduction. Sophia pretty much covered it all. I've been teaching journalism and media for a very long time. I practice broadcast news writing on a daily basis. It's something that I enjoy thoroughly. It's enjoyable to challenge myself every day to make stories shorter, take a 2-page press release and make it into something that you can read in 30 seconds and a minute. So that's the essence of what I do. I'm so glad that you all are interested in broadcast news writing. It warms me to know that so many of you are here today. And without further ado, let's get into my presentation. So we're going to do a little pretend today. Today, you students are student broadcast journalists. So welcome to your broadcast newsroom for today. I will be your head of news.
Hi, morning.
Hi.
1 second. Hello. Hi.
Yes. Hi.
We just wanted them to say. We just wanted them to say good morning to you, so I'm just putting video. Hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Come up, students.
This is so nice, Miss Ali. Thank you, because sometimes we don't get to see the students. Wonderful.
Hello, hello.
Great.
Brian Singh, good morning. Yeah.
Good morning.
You all will say your names, right?
Morning, sir. Kilan Williams.
Hi.
It's so good to see you all. We haven't gotten to see many of the students, so great.
Good morning, sir. Peter Maraj.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm hearing some of their names. I'm not hearing some of them, but it's nice to see your faces, guys.
So yeah, they are behind the they are looking on the projector, right? So we just take off the camera and then you can ask questions and they will answer.
Right, great. So just for some house rules, feel free to write any questions that you have into the chat, or just raise your hand or ask for excuse if you need to ask a question. I'm not going to leave the questions for after. If we can facilitate those questions during the presentation, then I'll do so. So feel free, don't be shy. It's an open discussion, so feel free to ask your questions, okay? As I said before, it's a newsroom we're operating today, and you all are student broadcast journalists, okay? So welcome again. Let's get started. Just let me know if you have any if I have any technical difficulties. Are you all seeing that? Let me just share my screen. Hold a second. Just give me a second here. Share. Let me know if you're seeing my screen.
I am seeing
Yes,
it.
yeah, I've seen it, yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to start the presentation from the beginning, right? And there we have broadcast news writing, some of the tools that you will need. We have a microphone, a recorder, flash drive, your laptop, and so on, right? Take lots of notes as a journalist too. This is our newsroom. I just took this. This is our pretend newsroom. So if you want to pretend that you're sitting there in a computer and we'll be writing a story for me today. So this is our BLF newsroom, okay? So your job, what would you have to do as a broadcast journalist, right? Now, the aim is to write factual copy. I mean, journalists, their credibility is everything. So you always need to verify, double check, triple check, quadruple check your information to ensure you present a factual copy. So your job today, and if you enter the profession as well, will be to always write factual copy. But in broadcast, we go a little bit further in that your copy has to be as short as possible, as tight as possible, and focused as possible. When we say short, tight, we're talking about it being very concise. I know sometimes, as we say in Trinidad, we tend to beat around the bush before we get to the point. That's not what broadcast news is about. We get to the point from the get-go, from the start, from your very first sentence. There's no setting a scene or anything like that. There is just presenting what happened, presenting the facts, okay? Focused, a focused piece of copy means that you're not going to write about 100 things in your story, all right? Your copy has to be focused in terms of one specific theme. So let's just say you're writing about property tax, for example. That's a topical issue, that's a controversial issue. You're not going to bring in stuff about, let's just say, fuel prices or any other piece of information. You're going to try to keep your copy as focused as possible on property tax. Because it's broadcast that you're talking about, your listeners will be following with their ear. They can't follow with their eyes to see that you have changed your topic or your theme. That's why you try to keep it focused with one idea, one theme throughout your story. Okay, any questions so far? And the last point there, with immediacy. Broadcast news is about what's happening now, not what happened last week, last month, last year. It's called news for a reason. And broadcast news is known for being very immediate. So let's just say, God forbid, there was an earthquake a short while ago, maybe a minute or two ago. You'd expect to hear something on the radio as soon as the earthquake is finished. That's how immediate broadcast copy or broadcast news is, right? So immediacy, very important in terms of writing broadcast news. And you have to paint pictures because your listener cannot see your script or cannot see your copy, or cannot see the scene that you're at because there's no video, for example. If we're talking about radio, there will be no video, there will be no pictures. So you have to use your words to paint that picture, to create that scene, to take your listener to the scene where you are. Let's just say it's an accident or another event. You have to take your listener to that scene with the words that you use. It has to be very clear, very vivid. So they will imagine what you are seeing based on the words that you are using. Okay? Now we are used to reading the newspaper. I would hope so. We are used to reading print copy, maybe from magazines, textbooks, and stuff like that. All right. But many of you may not have had exposure to broadcast copy. And with broadcast copy, you are writing for the air. When I say you're writing for the air, you're writing for your information, for your copy to be heard, not seen, because your listener is not seeing your copy. They are not seeing your story. All they are hearing are the words that you use in your story. So you're writing for it to be heard, not seen. And that matters because, as you will see later on in the presentation as well, but I can mention it here, the length of your sentences need to be short. The words that you use need to be simple. The ideas or the idea or thought you put into a sentence needs to be singular, needs to be one idea or thought per sentence. So when your listener hears it, it's easy for them to comprehend, it's easy for them to digest. So sometimes if you use big words, as we say, or jargon, they may not understand what you are trying to tell them. So I like to tell my students, think about language that you use in primary school, and you're using simple words like that. And what we all know, print stories you write for the eye because you can read, you can see the copy, you can see the print. You can read a long sentence. And if you don't get the idea, you can always go back and reread that sentence. But in broadcast, we don't have that luxury. So you need to make sure when you write your sentences, and this will come up in the presentation later on, when you write your sentences, when you write your stories, it is understood the very first time it is heard, because there's no playing back. There's no playing back that newscast. When it goes on air, that's it. So you have to get it right from the onset, from the very first time. Okay.
Seerattan, you saw a comment in the chat from Karima?
Could you help me with the comment, Sophia, if
Right,
possible?
she's saying that broadcast news, various news events or other information via television or the internet in the field of broadcast journalism. Right?
Okay,
So she's just defining what it was for you.
Okay, so when we refer to broadcast, I mean we talk about radio, we talk about television. Maybe when we refer to stuff on the internet, however, we refer to it as digital journalism. Okay, but predominantly we're talking about radio and television, of course. All right, an important element of broadcast news. An important element of broadcast news is writing in the present tense. So why write in the present tense? Remember what I said earlier, it's about immediate, it's about what's happening now. So when you use the present tense, you reflect the immediacy or the newness of the information that you're presenting. So when I say present tense, I mean, like, if you read a newspaper story, for example, you may see the Prime Minister, a state of emergency. This is not factual, of course, I'm just giving you an example. A state of emergency was declared in Trinidad and Tobago, said Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley. Now that's a construction that you will use. Now that's a construction that you use in print. However, in broadcast, we want to switch that sentence around and we want to change that said to says. Says is one of the safest, most used words in broadcast copy. So you will see Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley says a state of emergency has been declared in Trinidad and Tobago. So you reverse the sentence as well. And when you put the Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley at the end of the sentence, that's predominantly print. But when you bring it to the beginning of the sentence and change it and use says, that's in keeping with broadcast convention. Questions so far, guys? Great. That means doing well. You guys are. Now, The writing style for broadcast. I'll give you guys some tips today. One of them would be KISS, to keep it short and simple. Keep your copy short and simple. After this workshop is finished, always remember that if you're attempting to write any sort of broadcast copy, simplicity, brevity, that's paramount as well. And the dramatic unity structure. Now, this is the structure that we use for writing broadcast news. Just like in school, when you're writing a passage, when you're writing a composition, you have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, right? Similarly, in writing our broadcast stories, we utilize the dramatic unity structure, and that structure simply has 3 elements, and I think it's on the other slide, so let me just move over to it. Right, so it's the climax, pause, and effect. Climax, pause, effect. Now, what this structure does, it's like a formula for you. It makes your writing easier. If you're presented with a lengthy copy, if you're presented with... Yes?
Hello, are you moving the slides?
No, I'm on dramatic unity. Are you all seeing that slide? There's a slide called...
It's like on our screen.
We are only seeing the first slide.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me if you're seeing dramatic unity now. No?
Still not seeing it.
No.
Okay, let me just come out of full mode and I will go to...
We are seeing dramatic unity now. Don't move.
Okay,
We're
great.
seeing it now, yes.
Right. Are you all seeing it clearly?
We are.
All right, great. So I'll just stay out of full mode and I'll continue from... Yeah, I'll continue from there. Right. So the parts of dramatic unity, we have climax, cause, and effect. And I was mentioning this is like a formula. It makes your life easier in terms of writing broadcast copy. If you're presented with, let's just say, a multiple page press release, and I've gotten press releases that are 11 pages, 13 pages, 7 pages, 5 pages, and stuff like that. Now, when you have a press release like that, there's no way you can include every single thing that was said in that news release. All right. But when you apply this dramatic unity structure or formula, it helps you out. So in other words, you look at your press release for what is the climax. What has happened? What is the announcement? Because you're going to get a lot of information on a press release. But when you use this formula, I'm using that term loosely, when you use the formula, when you use the structure of dramatic unity, you automatically start to search for what has happened. All right? What is the announcement? And once you find that in your press release, that becomes your first sentence. That's like your topic sentence. That's your first line. In journalism, we call it our lead. All right? L-E-A-D, our lead. So in journalism, once you find that climax, it's your first sentence, it becomes your lead. So it makes your life easier. You don't have to fish around in terms of what do I put. You are going to put what has happened. What is the announcement? All right. Secondly, the cause. All right. And this gives some more explanation in terms of what you just put in your first sentence. All right. Maybe if you're writing about an accident, for example. So you'll say that 5 people have been injured in an early morning accident. Then your cause, the second line may be, well, how that accident happened. Maybe a dog ran across the road and the driver tried to avoid it. Maybe someone broke a traffic light. So the cause part of the story explains how that accident happened or the circumstances surrounding that event. All right, so that's another part of your story will come in there. So you automatically look for that in your press release. Okay, so what has happened? You know what happened? How did this happen? Does the press release say? Does the news release say how it happened? And then that becomes your maybe your second sentence in your story. All right. And then the effect part of it. Obviously, what's the effect? And let's go back to our accident example. Let's just say, what's the effect of it? Maybe there's a traffic pileup on the highway, right? Maybe there's a traffic pileup on the highway because of the accident on both lanes, northbound, southbound, eastbound, westbound. So you will want to give the effect of what has happened in your story, in the accident. Another thing that,
before you move
yeah?
on, Anil Seerattan is saying broadcast journalist is the field of news and journalism and journals which are broadcast by electronic methods instead of older methods such as print newspapers and posters.
Yeah,
I just saw
definitely.
that one come up, yes.
Yeah, thanks, Sophia. Thanks so much. Okay. Right. And another thing I want to mention in terms of the effect part of broadcast news writing and the dramatic unity structure. The effect, you can also mention things like, is this a trend? Is this the 5th accident that has occurred at that particular intersection in the past week or in the past month? So you would want to add value to your story like that as well by bringing in that sort of information in the effect as well. So you have your climax, what has happened, cause of, obviously, the cause of the accident, let's just say, or what happened, and obviously the effect, maybe there's a traffic pileup, or you can include other information such as, you know, maybe there has been other accidents in the past or in the recent past that you want to mention or tell your listener. Now, this structure, what I want to mention to you, this structure, this dramatic unity structure, it's so important for broadcast news because it always keeps your listener engaged. You don't want your listener to turn the station. You want them to listen to every bit of information you have in your story. All right. So it's like if you're telling a story to a friend, you don't start off by telling them the boring part first. You don't tell them, well, you know, I was walking down the road and the sun was shining and the birds were chirping and then this happened to me. No. You will automatically tell them from the onset, the climax, what good or bad event happened to you this morning, right? That's the first thing you'll tell a friend. Then secondly, you tell them how it happened. And obviously you tell them how you feel or the effect of what has happened to them. So just like how you keep your friend engaged in the way you tell a story, similarly, with the dramatic unity structure, you keep your listener engaged all the time. I just want to mention in print if you're looking at a newspaper story, for example, print stories do not follow the dramatic unity structure. Print stories actually follow what we know as the inverted pyramid, right? And you all could look up inverted pyramid. I just thought I want to mention to you because we're talking about the dramatic unity structure. Now, the inverted pyramid looks like an upside down triangle. And how that structure operates is that you put all the most important information at the top of the story. And then as the story goes down, then you put the less important information, and then you go down to the least significant piece of information if you have. So it's written like that for newspaper because if you have to edit your story, if you need to cut your story, it's usually cut from the bottom of the story so that nothing important is cut out. So that's what we would use for print. So we can't really use that we shouldn't really use that for broadcast, because if we want to keep our listeners engaged all the time, then we need to give them, every piece of information that we give them needs to be as important as possible to them. So that's why we use the dramatic unity structure for broadcast news writing. Questions so far, guys? Are you all seeing the new slide? It's supposed to be an example of a dramatic unity structure in use. Are you seeing that?
No, sir.
You're seeing dramatic unity climax. Yep, citizens are expected to. Great. Now this is just a hypothetical situation, an example I just crafted to make sure you guys understand the whole dramatic unity structure. Right, citizens are expected to pay between $400 and $1,000 in residential property tax from next year. The announcement of the yearly amount comes from Finance Minister Coleman, but notice the use of the present tense as well. I didn't say came from, I said comes from, right? And obviously because the Parliament has passed the controversial property tax bill, right? So that's why, because the legislation has now been passed, citizens will be expected to pay this amount from next year, right? And obviously the legislation was passed after intense debate in the Parliament, of course. So that's the cause. That's why we would have to pay this property tax from next year. And the effect, right? What happens now? So the bill now goes to the president for signature because it has to be signed into law. And well, the effect of this is that the government is likely to get $20 million in revenue from the collection of property tax. And I brought in some context just as the example said, that the passage of the bill is a major victory because, I mean, the opposition has resisted it. So now that it's passed, it's like a victory for the government. So I brought in the context as well to let the listener know that this is something that the opposition resisted, but the government was pushing for it. So that's how you would apply the dramatic unity to an actual news story. Do you guys have any questions about that? At the end of the presentation, we'll have a fun exercise. I will give you just a very short press release, and you can apply the dramatic unity structure to that press release and write a broadcast news story. Okay. So no questions so far. As I said before, don't be shy. It's an open conversation. Anything that you don't understand or you want me to go over, just let me know. Right. Are you seeing tips for broadcast news? Just making sure.
Mm-hmm.
Right, great. I just want to make sure technology isn't failing us. Right. So tips for broadcast news. So I'm going to give you some tips, you student broadcast journalists. I'm giving you some tips in terms of writing your broadcast copy. Right. Your writing should be conversational. Right. When you're writing broadcast, this is not an opportunity to let your listeners know that you know big words, you know a lot of jargon, because you want to communicate effectively with them. And the way you do that is that you use words that we'll use in everyday speech. Okay. We're not going to use words as though we are doing a lecture or anything like that, or presenting a scientific paper, presenting a literature review, not those kinds of things. No, you're writing the way you speak. You're writing conversational. And when I say we write the way we speak, I don't mean in the vernacular. I don't mean colloquially. We're using our standard English, but we're writing, obviously, in the sentences that we use in our daily lives. So write the way you speak. And I think I alluded to this earlier, where you need to be simple and direct. Don't beat around the bush, right? Be as simple as possible. Simplify your information. Sometimes you get releases, let's just say, like a business press release or an energy press release. It has good information, newsworthy information, and you need to simplify that information for your listener. You don't know who is listening to the news. Maybe someone who has a PhD is listening to the news, but maybe someone who didn't go to school is also listening to the news as well. All right. So you need to be simple in the way you write, in the words that you use. All right. Be careful of information overload. I know there is a lot to say, but you just have to select the news out of whatever you may have covered. Let's just say you're covering Parliament or the Senate, maybe a court sitting. Those things go on for hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. Sometimes they go overnight. There's no way you can get all of that into 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, right? There's no way you can get all of that into that short time frame. With print, obviously, you have some more leeway, you have more space to write, but in broadcast, we don't. So be careful of information overload. All right. I give the example to my students all the time. I use this analogy. Think that you're feeding a baby. You have a bowl of food and you need to get that food into that baby. So you have a lot of information and you need to get this information to your listeners. So that's the analogy. You have a bowl of food. Are you going to take a tablespoon and try to feed that baby? No, it's not going to be effective. Similarly, with broadcast news, you do the same thing. You are going to give your listener bite-sized pieces of information. You're not going to use a tablespoon. You're not going to use what we call a pot spoon. You might want to use a teaspoon and give them that bits of information for it to be effective. So I like to use an analogy in advising students how they should go about writing broadcast news. And read your story out loud. In the newsroom where I work, you hear mutterings all the time. So one reporter is at a desk, another reporter is at another desk, I'm at my desk, and you just hear muttering, you hear reading, you hear, words, because we are all reading our stories out loud. Because why? We are writing for the air. We don't want to see how it looks. We want to hear how it sounds. So when you write for the air, you read your stories out loud so that you can hear your story. And oftentimes when you do that, then you may have picked up on something that you should have cut out, something that you can simplify when you read your stories out loud. Okay? Questions? Okay, great. So we have some more tips here.
Excuse me,
Yes?
I have a question.
Yeah.
How do you get the confidence to read it out?
How do I get the
Say
that again?
Confidence to read out like a broadcast, because I know most people will be anxious to do that. How do you get the confidence to do it?
The competence. Well, the thing is, you're not. The thing is, you're not reading it. Confidence. Yes. Confidence. Okay. The thing is, you're not reading it for the entire population. All right. You're not reading it for. You're not reading it on air, because at this point in time when you're writing, this is just in the newsroom. The only person who is going to hear you would be yourself, maybe your colleague or colleagues, and your head of news or your editor. So these are people that you know that you should be comfortable with as well. So there's no reason to be shy there. You're not going to be on air for the entire public or the entire population to hear you. So in my newsroom, there's no issue in terms of whether you're confident or not. It's just that you read your story out loud, you hear how it sounds, your editor or your head of news also hear how it sounds, and then you submit it to them. So as I said before, nobody's going to hear you except those people who are in your immediate vicinity in the newsroom. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
No problems. Right. Just moving on. Right, as I mentioned to you, be brief. I can't underscore this enough. Be brief. Now, radio news stories are seconds, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. Radio news stories are very short, right? And these time limits I'm giving you are pretty much like international standards, right? You have to tell your story in 30 seconds, 60 seconds, sometimes even less than 30 seconds. You can get your story out if it's for radio, all right? And that translates to 100 to 120 words. I'll just give you a guide. This is a guide. Don't think it is like a law or anything like that. It's just some guide that once you hit 120 words, it's definitely time to stop writing. I think that's the upper limit. That's the maximum that you should have for a radio news story. I'm specifying radio here, right? If you're looking at television, you have a little bit more leeway in television. Maybe your stories can go 2 minutes. Locally, I see some stories going to 3 minutes, but you also have to pay attention to the attention span. You also have to pay attention to what your listener or viewer is doing. Sometimes they may not be sitting in front of the television looking at the TV news. They may be cooking, they may be ironing, they may be doing some other thing in the house. So they are distracted as well. And you have to take into consideration what's happening maybe around your listener, what they're doing, and around your viewer, and also what they're doing. So you want to try to make sure you get that message out in a short space of time before they indulge or continue doing what they're doing there, whichever surroundings they are in. All right. So for radio, sum up, you can keep it to, a good average is 100. If you go to 120, try to see if you can cut down, but I put that as an upper limit for you all as students. And try to keep your stories, to 30 seconds, 60 seconds. If it's radio, if it's TV, I'll tell you, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, it's a good average. Right? If it's a really important story, I'll tell you to discuss it. If you get into the industry, I'll tell you discuss it with your editor or your head of news. You look, I need some more time with this story. You need to discuss that with them as well. Right? Short sentences, we spoke about this before, but I'm bringing in a figure, right? 20 words or less. 20 words or less per sentence. Now, again, this is a guide. I don't want you to just sit and count all the words in your sentences to try to make it, well, my sentence is not 20 words, so I need to add on a few. No, this is just a guide for you in terms of whether you're going too long. So if you have like 30, 35, then you need to cut that sentence. You need to probably split that sentence into two. Eliminate, some of the unnecessary words, stuff like that. All right. So what's the danger? What's the danger in having long sentences? It makes it difficult for the person reading the news, for the newscaster or the presenter. They can run out of breath. They can run out of air when they have to read a long sentence. And also your listener or viewer could get lost in that you start off by telling them one thing and you have several thoughts or ideas in that one sentence. And by the time you're done, they're lost in terms of comprehension. They don't know what you were saying. And guess what? They can't go back or replay it because it's either radio or TV, unless you're recording your TV news. But definitely, if you're driving in your car, you're not recording the radio news. All right, so there's no way you can replay that newscast. So keep your sentences short. Okay. Use contractions, right? Because it allows for words to just roll off your tongue. For example, like don't say do not if you're writing a copy, right? Use the contractions that we all know. As I said before, don't, won't, all those kinds of things. It sounds conversational. It also makes the copy just roll off your tongue if you're reading it. So I'd encourage you all to use the contractions when you're writing broadcast copy, unless you really need to stress words like not. So if you think that maybe there is a very important story, or there is something that you need to put that not in there and you need to stress it, then don't use the contractions. But as a general advice, use the contractions, but there are instances, or there may be instances where you might have to stress on that not, so you don't use the contraction in that instance. Okay, those are some of the tips that we have so far. We have some more. Do you all have any questions so far? I'm trying to give you all enough tips, enough material, so when you have to write your broadcast copy at the end of this, it should be easy for you all. All right, so moving on with tips. Right, this is something that we were taught in primary school. Subject, verb, object, subject, verb, object, right? Use that sort of sentence structure. So when I told you all earlier that we went back to, sentences that we wrote in primary school, I wasn't joking, all right? It is the simplest form of communication. Subject, verb, object, right? You have your subject. The boy hit the ball. Yeah, Ryan Singh is saying that, yeah, it won't hold the attention of listeners exactly. So that's the essence, that's the importance of having your short sentences. Definitely, Ryan, you lose the attention of your listener or
Just a
viewer.
quick
Yeah,
note from Ryan. Ryan is saying if the sentences are too long, it won't hold the attention of the listeners.
yeah, I mentioned that. Yeah, I just mentioned that to him. Yeah, so
Okay, good.
thanks
I
so
wasn't
much.
sure if you saw it. Sorry.
No, that's okay, Sophia. I appreciate your help. Thanks so much. So right, so back to subject, verb, object. So it's a short sentence. Subject, verb, object. The boy hit the ball. Simple. It also shows the action. So it segues into our second point, right, in terms of writing in the active voice. The active voice is very much the same thing in terms of writing to show your action, right? There's active voice and passive voice, all right? In the active, if you use the active voice, you actually demonstrating or writing about the action. The action is within the sentence. So the boy hit the ball. The action is hit, all right? And then obviously the ball is the object. Subject, boy hit the ball, right? It's showing the action of the boy hitting the ball. That's your active voice. Passive voice would be if you write, the ball was hit by the boy. In this instance, in this case, the action has already happened. It has already happened. So in broadcast news, we encourage students, we encourage journalists to use simple sentence structure, subject, verb, object to show your action, and it becomes writing in active voice. That's the first part I want to mention to you. The second part I want to mention is to use active verbs. Use strong verbs. And I explain why in a bit. I'll explain why in a bit. Now, my very controversial line there, right? I know some teachers may come in to talk about that. My very controversial line. Limit the use of adverbs and adjectives. Limit the use of adverbs and adjectives. Think back what I said earlier. Your writing has to be descriptive. You have to paint that picture for your listener or viewer. How are you going to do that if you limit adverbs and adjectives? And why are we limiting adverbs and adjectives? I'll tell you why. Adverbs and adjectives can be vague and can be subjective. So if you use strong verbs in place of adverbs, and obviously you eliminate the use of adjectives, your writing becomes clearer for your listener and your viewer. So if we say the couple walked slowly along the beach, can you picture how slowly or how slow the couple walked? That's a question. Anybody, can you picture that? Are you seeing that? Anybody? Come on, students. Is it clear for you?
Yes, sir.
It is. But slow,
Excuse, sir.
would be,
Excuse, sir.
yeah.
Could you repeat what I just said? We didn't hear you.
Okay. So I was asking, I was going to say, if I tell you the couple walked slowly along the beach, is that clear? Are you getting a vivid image in your mind as to the pace the couple is walking at?
No, sir. I said, we
I
know
think
how slow.
I agree with you guys. I agree with you guys, right? And Faith is also Faith is saying she doesn't think so, and I agree because it's subjective and it doesn't create that clear, that vivid image we want to create. So rather than saying, so for me, I mean, I think I walk very quickly, but for some people say no, he's very slow. So it's not as clear as it should be, and it can be subjective. So rather than using the adverb, why don't we just use a strong verb and say,
Sorry, sir. We have some technical difficulties over here.
okay, where did I lose you guys? I was mentioning, we finished the point in terms of walked slowly along the beach, and I was gonna say, instead of saying walked slowly along the beach, why don't we use something stronger, something clearer, and say the couple strolled along the beach?
Mr. Seerattan, before you move, Faith is saying she doesn't think that she can.
Yes, I agree with her as well. I mentioned that to her a short while ago, that
Yeah.
I fully agree with her as well. So thanks, Sophia. So we need to move away. If we're talking about broadcast writing, we would need to move away from or avoid the use of adjectives and adverbs to include something more concrete, strong, active verbs to give the actual meaning, to paint the actual picture you want to convey. So if we want to say, for example, the protesters walked along the street, or the protesters walked up the hill, I don't think that would be the appropriate word to use. It's about using, I think we should use words like stronger words like the protesters marched. They marched along the street. You get that picture, you get that image when you use words like that. The protesters marched along the street. The protesters marched up the hill. So when you say walk, I mean, it's not very vivid in terms of the action that's being done. So Use your active voice, use your active verbs, your strong verbs, your active verbs, and limit the use of adverbs and adjectives in your broadcast writing. All right. Let's just say you're talking about an escaped prisoner, and you want to describe that prisoner. Do you say, well, you know, he's tall or he's short? Again, that's subjective, tall and short. What is the benchmark for a tall person or benchmark for a short person? Those words, they don't add clarity. So you need to be more specific. If you're talking about an escaped prisoner, and let's just say the prisoner is very tall, you want to describe that to the population. You will say the escaped prisoner is so tall, he has to duck under a doorway to get into a room. Then you see that image, you see that picture, and that's what we want to do in broadcasting. We want to create that image, we want to create that picture. All right? Any questions so far? Great. Another point I mentioned to you before, use the present tense in your broadcast writing as far as possible. And I put in there as far as possible because sometimes you're writing about an event that happened yesterday. Let's just say, now we had an actual event. The budget was passed in the Senate yesterday. So if that's your story, you're writing, so the Senate has passed the national budget, or the Senate has passed the 2024 budget. Speaking in the House yesterday, Finance Minister Colin Imbud said there is no way we can put says because we have the adverb of time. Speaking in the Senate yesterday, it will be grammatically incorrect if we say Finance Minister Colin Imbud says. So, as far as possible, use the present tense. But if you can't, ensure your stories are grammatically correct, grammatically sound. So if you say, speaking in the House yesterday, Finance Minister Colin Imbud said, that is fine because you are being grammatically correct. Okay, try to use it. If it's not possible, then you'll have to go with the past tense, right? Select the information that you need. Select the salient point, the most important points for your story. Broadcast news is about selection and not compression. You're not trying to compress 5 or 6 hours worth of a parliament sitting, 4 hours worth or 2 hours worth of a court sitting. You're not trying to compress that to write for broadcast because chances are you can't do it. You would not be able to do it. What you have to do is select the most important information that you want for your story, the salient points you want to include in your story. So select the information, don't compress it because there's no way you can compress 6 hours worth of information into 30 seconds, into 60 seconds, into 90 seconds. All right. The other point I mentioned to you before, it talks about attribution. And attribution really means who you are attributing a statement to, or the person making the statement, the person or the entity or the organization making the statement. So earlier I mentioned to you that Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley says a state of emergency has been declared in Trinidad and Tobago, has been declared in this country. The attribution goes at the beginning. The attribution is the person who is making the statement. You're attributing that statement to the Prime Minister. He is the person that made the statement. So you say, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley says, state of emergency has been declared in this country. Obviously, that's hypothetical. That's not true at all. That's just an example I'm using to demonstrate where you put the attribution for broadcast news. As I mentioned earlier, in print, the attribution or the person who said the statement or who made the statement comes at the end of the sentence. So you will say, a state of emergency was declared in Trinidad and Tobago, said Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley. The person who made the statement comes actually at the end of the sentence if you're writing that story for print. But we're focusing on broadcast. So I just want to mention the difference in terms of attribution. The attribution with broadcast comes at the beginning. You always state who is making a particular statement at the beginning. Let's just say you're writing about, for this exercise, you'll have to write about, you have to write a press release from WASA. So you'll say WASA says whatever WASA had to say. The attribution, you're attributing your statements to WASA, and it comes at the beginning of the sentence, not at the end of your sentence. An important point also in broadcast news would be to round off your numbers, right? I'll also tell you to limit the numbers that you use in your broadcast stories, because it's difficult for your listener or viewer to follow multiple numbers, 1 and 2. If those numbers are not rounded off, it's difficult for them to remember the exact figure. So what we do in broadcast news is that we round off our numbers, right? So we had a budget recently, and it was 49 million and some 100,000, 49 billion, some millions and some 100,000s and stuff like that. But if you're writing that for broadcast, there's no way your listener is going to remember that exact figure. Because you're dealing with a big figure, you're going into billions. So what we encourage broadcast writers to do will be to round off your numbers, right? If you're saying something costs $19.85, well, you just say, well, he paid almost $20 for it. If something costs $19.95, it costs almost $20. So you round off your numbers. They are easily remembered by your listener or viewer, and they're digestible and they can be recalled easily. Okay, so you don't try to include 1, multiple figures in your writing, and 2, exact figures, because, as I said before, some listeners, some viewers may not remember exact figures if they are too long. So you round off those numbers in your writing. Questions so far, guys? Great. Moving on.
No questions, sir.
Yeah.
No, we said no questions.
Okay, great. No questions. Okay, great. Got you. I'll give you a thumbs up. Right. So how do you remember all of this? How do you remember everything that we went through today, or we've gone through so far? Right. Remember I spoke to you guys earlier about KISS. Keep it short and simple. Right. So that would help you guys in terms of remembering broadcast news writing. The other thing I want you guys to do will be to remember the 6 C's. Right? Remember the 6 C's, and these 6 C's are for broadcast writing. We call the 6 C's of broadcast news writing. Right? Your copy has to be clear. Can't be vague at all. It has to be concise, something that I was saying earlier. It has to be conversational, written for the air. It has to be complete. Now I'll go into all the points in a bit. I'm just telling you. It has to be complete, meaning you have to answer. In journalism, we have the 5 W's and the H, what we call the 5 W's and the H, the who, what, where, when, why, and how. Right? You have to make sure your story, your broadcast copy, answers those questions for your listener or viewer. So your story has to be complete. In other words, when you're finished with your story, your listener should have no questions, because the story is complete. In other words, you've covered the 5 W's and the H in your writing for broadcast news.
Mr. Seerattan, Ryan said C to the power of 6.
So yes to the power of 6. Okay, great. And the other thing is it has to be current. Broadcast news, as I mentioned earlier, is about what's happening now. It's immediate. It has to be current. It's not what happened last month or last week or last day. It has to be current. And finally, and probably the most important, it has to be correct. I can't underscore this point enough because of the dangers of social media and stuff like that. It has to be correct. It has to be factual. Okay? So those are your 6 C's, and I'll go into them just to make sure. This is like a recap, or just to kind of help cement most of what we've covered so far for the morning, right? As I mentioned to you before, it has to be clear so that your audience will understand it the first time they hear it. The initial time they hear it, they have to understand it. They can't go back and replay that radio newscast. So writing has to be simple. It has to be basic, right? Limit your sentences to one idea or thought. If you find that you're talking about 2 and 3 and 4 stuff in one sentence, tell yourself this sentence is way too long if you're writing for broadcasters. Limit your sentences to one idea or thought. And that way, your sentence automatically becomes shorter. Okay, again, broadcast copy is short. You use short sentences. The actual story itself is short. All right, you practice here in being concise. You practice here what we call, or what I call, word economy. Word economy. You're economizing on the words that you use. All right. If you can cut 3 words and just put 1 word in the place of 3, do that. Shorten your sentences. Eliminate unnecessary words, right? Cut out the fat, as we say. Put the bare information. Okay? There's no need to be flowery with your language and to add in unnecessary words. Okay? Practice word economy. Economize on the words that you use. Use less words where you can. Okay? Without, of course, changing the essence of your story. Ryan is saying that the main points of the broadcast at the bottom of the screen in red. Could you just give me an example, Ryan? I'm not seeing anything red.
So like one example I go use is like when news on and thing, you see the headlines on and it's written on red.
Okay, so no, what you're talking about, Ryan, thanks for the question. What you're talking about, those words or sentences that you see at the bottom of the television screen, that's your ticker tape. That's not what we are talking about here. Those sentences, they actually just recap some of the stories that are actually making the headlines or that are in the newscast. So that's the ticker tape that you're talking about at the bottom of the screen in a television newscast. Is that what you're mentioning? So the purpose of that, as I mentioned, is just be to let the viewers know what are some of the main stories or the headline stories in the newscast. Okay. Right. So I'm moving on from being concise, right? Using only those essential words. We spoke about this before, right? Being conversational. So this is another C, right? Write how you speak, how you converse with people. And how we converse with people, it's actually easy on the air. So why not write our broadcast copy the same way? And I mentioned this during the presentation. Why don't you tell a story the same way you will tell a friend? Get straight to the point. Tell them how it happened and tell them the effect of what happened. Okay? Moving on from conversational, I mentioned to you this when I brought this up. Your story has to be complete. Your listeners or viewers should have no questions when your story is finished. All right, so you have to answer, you should answer who, what, where, when, why, and perhaps it's saying that sometimes you may not get the why right away, why something has happened. All you know is that something has happened, an event has happened, you may not know why, but definitely in a subsequent newscast, you can update your listener or your viewer in terms of why something would have happened, maybe an accident or a shooting, something else, right? So if you can't answer that question right away, then you need to tell your listener, look, we don't know why this has happened, but we are investigating and we'll bring you an update in a subsequent newscast. So they're not left guessing in terms of, did this media house leave out something? Did they forget something? Did this reporter forget something? Okay, so try to ensure your stories answer. Try to ensure your stories answer those 5 W's and obviously the H. How things happened as well, right? That's ensuring your stories are complete. Your stories have to be, should be as timely or as current as possible, right? Journalists always strive to be first with the news, right? So ensure that your copy is timely when you are reporting it. If something has just happened, you know, try to get it on news as fast as possible. Again, I'm always including this, always double check, triple check, quadruple check your information to make sure it's factual, because rushing is no excuse for things that are not factual. Always double check, triple check, quadruple check your information while rushing to be first, right, with the news. And it brought back the point there has, it brought back the present tense, and it says obviously whenever possible, because I pointed out earlier, there are times, it depends on how you construct a sentence, you may not be able to stick to the present tense. So in instances where, based on the sentence construction, if you have to phrase it in the past tense, then you need to be grammatically correct. So you obviously have to go into the past tense. Okay, but using the present tense, as I mentioned earlier, always brings back that sense of immediacy in relation to what you are reporting. Okay. So that's reporting timely copy and your stories being current. I can't underscore this enough, making sure your copy is correct, right? Making sure your copy is correct. As I mentioned earlier, journalists value their credibility. Without their credibility, people are not going to trust you to say, well, you know, this journalist doesn't report factual information. You don't want to be accused of that. So you always want to ensure that your stories are factual, and as the point says there, you know, proofread your stories to make sure that your spelling is correct, that your grammar, that you're using the correct grammar as well. So proofread your stories to make sure they are correct. Okay. And then in conclusion, this is not one of the 6 C's, but it's also a C, conclusion. When you write your broadcast copy, use everyday language, use the Write the way you speak, all right? Except the vernacular and colloquial stuff. Write in short sentences, use short sentences. And one way to ensure that your sentences are short or to assist you is keep it to one idea or thought. Once you know, if you see a sentence has to have and in it or multiple commas, then you know you're going way too long with that sentence because you're bringing in more than one idea or thought. So keep your sentences short with one idea or thought. Use present tense because it gives that broadcast copy the edge in terms of sounding fresh, sounding immediate. And this is something I mentioned, the last point I mentioned, way up in the beginning of the presentation. Confine your story to one major theme. If you're talking about property tax, make sure your story only deals with property tax, right? And I put back that point in there because let's just say you're reporting on a Senate sitting, the House of Representatives, or a court hearing, for example. Multiple things are brought up. Multiple things are brought up during those sittings or hearings. And you want to report as much as possible. You want to report so many things, but you can't jump from theme to theme in your very short broadcast story. What I encourage my reporters to do, if they cover an event and they have more than one story coming out of it, they have more than one what we call angle coming out of that event, then do a separate story, right? So for example, we covered the Senate sitting yesterday, my newsroom, that is. Multiple stories came out of that. But there's no way we would have put all of that information into one story. So what we did, we just broke up the stories. We just broke up and wrote individual stories based on a particular topic, right? So you understand that word. So let's just say the finance minister spoke about property tax. We rewrote one story on property tax. He also spoke about the retirement age. Now, we didn't bring in the retirement age in the property tax story. No, we just wrote a separate story on the retirement age. The finance minister also spoke about the Point Fortin Highway. We did not bring in that Point Fortin Highway into the two earlier stories that I spoke about. No, we just wrote a separate story based on a separate topic of the Point Fortin Highway. So if you have multiple pieces of information, multiple stories, multiple angles coming out of an event, then you just write separate stories for each particular one. Don't try to ram and cram, as we say, everything into one story, because at the end of the day, you're communicating. You want to communicate effectively. You don't want your listener or viewer to be lost, right? Because they might start off here in your news talking about property tax, and then you jump into retirement age, and then you jump into Point Fortin Highway, and that would confuse them. Remember, they're following with their ear. They're not following with their eye. They're following with their ear. So we simplify it, we make it digestible for them if we stick to one major topic per story. So that's my advice in terms of broadcast news writing. It's a very expansive topic. It's a very expansive area. There's absolutely no way I can cover every single thing for broadcast news writing in a very short 2-hour or 3-hour workshop. This is a course that I teach for 15 weeks. So, I'm practicing what I preach. I can't compress all that information into just 3 hours or 2 hours. What I can do, or what I did, was just selected what I thought would have been some of the main points, some of the basic needs of broadcast news writing for this particular workshop to introduce you to broadcast news writing. And as Sophia mentioned earlier, if you are interested in pursuing it, come to our school, pursue that associate degree or bachelor's degree, journalism, mass communications, right? And part of those degrees, you'll have courses with me in terms of fundamentals of reporting, broadcast news writing, where we delve more into the topic, as I said before, over a span of 15 weeks. So we obviously will be able to cover more material. So I hope I was helpful. I hope I didn't go too quickly and you are better off at the end of my presentation. I hope you all are better off in terms of knowing a bit about broadcast news writing, and that you could practice or that you can implement some of the things that I would have mentioned in my presentation. So thank you so very much for your attention, for your questions. If you have any additional ones, I'll take them now before we go into the activity. And I'm seeing a student already on camera. So let's go.
Yes. Thank you for presenting this, how to say this? This
Workshop?
slide. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
No, the slide.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You are most welcome. This is something I genuinely enjoy. I like sharing my knowledge in this area. So it is an enjoyable experience for me. All right. So we have our activity. Do you all have any questions for me? Do you all have any other questions? Sophia, you have any questions? Did you enjoy the presentation as well?
Absolutely. I have no questions. I am just excited to see what your exercise is going to be, because I am certain that the students will do justice to whatever you've done in this very short time frame. I know I've seen the work that these students can produce, so I look forward to whatever you're going to do.
Okay, great. So it's raining on my end, so I hope I don't have any technical difficulties. It's just raining on my end. Let me just open the press release and we'll get started. So I think my computer froze. Are you all hearing me and seeing me still?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see you.
Okay, great. So I think it's responding again. Excellent. I get so scared with technology. I get so scared. Right?
Excuse me.
Yes.
I have a question for you. How did you get into broadcast writing? Well, news
How
writing.
did I get into broadcast writing? So I was a former student at COSTAATT. I pursued my associate degree in journalism and public relations at COSTAATT. And then I went on to pursue, a bachelor's in education. And then I went on to pursue a master's in media communication and public relations at a foreign university. So I got into broadcast while actually I was a student at COSTAATT. In my final year, I submitted an application to a radio network. I submitted my resume and my application as part of my application to a radio network. They called me in for an interview. They gave me a little small test at the beginning where I wrote a broadcast news story for them. Apparently they were impressed, and well, 19 to 20 years later, here I am still employed at that organization. So that's how I got into broadcast news writing.
He's being very modest. What he's not telling you is that he's the head of news at that organization. So anyway, I will leave it there. So Mr. Seerattan.
So let me just get that press release for you. I'm just going into my email here and I'm gonna get the press release. And I'll pull it up for you guys. If you can just give me one moment. I can take any questions in the meantime, because I'm just going to get the press release from my email for you. Any other questions, guys? Please feel free. If you have any comments.
Faith, I see your mic is open, but if you're saying anything, we can't hear you just yet. I don't know if you have a comment for us, Faith.
You'll hear me now?
We are hearing
Yeah,
you
we're
now.
hearing you now. Yeah.
Okay, we weren't here for, well, I wasn't here for the first part of the session, so I'm kind of lost to what is happening. If you could just have like a view of in the first part of the session, please.
Okay. So if you help me, if you let me know where you picked up from, I'll be able to not go over everything, but I definitely start. I'll tell you what you would have missed. Where did you pick up from, Faith?
From when you was telling us about the tips on how to write a broadcast, like a paper thing, yeah.
So how to write for broadcast news? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just, would you guys mind if I just take 5 minutes just to help Faith with what you would have missed? I know we have the time for it. Sophia, is that okay with you as well?
That's okay with me, but you know, we'll have to keep it tight. But I
Right.
also want Faith to be able to participate fully in the exercise, and for us to be able to do that, if the other students want, they can perhaps take like a 5-minute break while we bring Faith up to speed. So if you
Yeah,
need to
that's
go
a
to
good
the
idea.
washroom or do anything or whatever, you can take a 5-minute break. So it's now 10:28. So
Yeah.
let's say you'll be back in 5 minutes at 10:33, right? So you can go ahead, Mr. Seerattan, the other students, you can take a small break.
Yeah, great, great. Right. So Faith, what I was mentioning is that, you know, broadcast news is really about writing, writing conversationally, writing for the air, writing for your copy to be heard, not seen, but heard. And it calls for great care in how you craft that copy, how you write that copy. You want to use short sentences. You want to use simple words. You want to just cut out all that jargon. You don't want to prove to your listener that you know all these scientific terms and all these business terms and stuff like that. No. You want to show them how simple you can write and you can break down the content for them. All right. I also spoke about reading your copy out loud. So whenever you write broadcast news, you want to read your copy out loud to hear how it sounds. Because you're writing for the air, you want to hear how your copy sounds. If you don't do that, then you would not pick up on any issues that you would have, any mistakes, any grammatical mistakes, any missing words and stuff like that. So reading your copy is important in writing broadcast news. So you write conversationally, you write using everyday words that we use, we write how we speak, we use short sentences, we use short words, we read our copy out loud to make sure there are no issues with it. We avoid information overload. I spoke about that. Trying to, as I use the word, cram too much information in a story. You don't want to do that because your listener or your viewer will get lost. So you don't want to do that. You want to just keep your, you just want to keep your story to one major topic. Don't try to switch or include multiple topics in your broadcast news story. All right, let me just see if I could Let me just see if I can bring up back the PowerPoint for you. For some reason, my computer is freezing to bring up the PowerPoint, but I can remember it from my head. I mentioned also that broadcast news is written in present tense because it reflects the immediacy. Broadcast news is about what's happening now. So when you write in that present tense, it reflects the immediacy or the newness or the freshness of the news or information that you're presenting. Okay. I said something controversial. I didn't get any backlash for it. I mentioned to limit the use of adverbs and adjectives. Limit your use of adverbs and adjectives. Use strong verbs. Use active verbs instead of your adjectives, of your adverbs and adjectives, because those adverbs and adjectives can be subjective. They can be open to interpretation. And I gave the example like, why would we want to say the couple walked slowly along the beach, right? It doesn't create that vivid picture we want. Walking slowly could mean a lot of things for different people. Some people might say, well, that's fast and that's slow. It does not convey the meaning. It doesn't create that picture you want in the mind of your listener. So a better word to use would be the couple strolled along the beach. You automatically get that meaning. You automatically get that picture. Okay, so and stuff like tall and short and that kind of thing. Well, what's the standard for that? What's tall and short? No, I mentioned, compare the height of persons to, let's just say, like a doorway. If you're talking about an escaped prisoner, for example, and you want your public to know, well, how tall this prisoner is. Well, prisoner is so tall, he has to duck under a doorway to get into or to get out of a room. So we have an average idea how tall a doorway is. So when you bring in that type of analogy, your listener gets that picture that we want to create. Okay, so those are some of the things that I mentioned for broadcast writing. I mentioned that today we're pretending we have a pretend BLF newsroom. We have a newsroom in operation today. I'm going to give an exercise shortly where you write a broadcast news story for me, a radio news story. Very, very short, maybe 30 seconds to 60 seconds in length. And at the end of the exercise, which is just like about maybe half hour, you guys will present it for me. So those are some of the things that I would have spoken about, writing short copy, making sure your copy is concise, tight, creating that image for your listener, right? Writing for the air. I touched on that. I'm just going through my PowerPoint just to make sure I didn't forget anything. Keeping it, I gave the acronym, KISS, keep it short and simple. Keep it short and simple when you're writing for broadcast. I spoke about the dramatic unity structure. That's the structure we use for broadcast writing. And that structure has 3 parts, which is the climax, your cause, and effect. The climax, obviously, deals with what has happened, or what is the story, what happened, what you're reporting on. That's your climax. That's your first sentence. The second sentence would obviously be the cause. Well, really, how it happened. How that accident that you're writing about, or whatever else that you're writing about, how that happened. So that's a cause. And obviously the effect will be your last sentence. How this will affect the population. If it's an accident, is it creating traffic? Right? Is it creating traffic on the highway? So the structure that we use for broadcast news writing, or that we should use, I should say, is the dramatic unity structure. Okay. It lends itself to always keeping the listener engaged, because you're always giving them very important information, your climax, important information, the pause, the effect. It follows the general pattern of how you tell a story to a friend. All right. When you're telling a story to a friend, you give them the juicy piece of information first, what happened, and then you tell them how it happened. And obviously you will explain the effect of what happened. So it follows the tell a friend, tell a friend technique that I encourage my students and listeners to do.
Yeah.
And pretty much that's about it in terms of broadcast news writing. I hope I was able to bring you up to speed.
Yeah. So, Mr. Seerattan, thanks so much for that. I was just going to say to Faith, the good thing about this is that this session is being recorded, and Ms. Hazard will actually upload it after to the website or to their social media. So you will have access to the data and the information that would have been shared in this entire workshop, right? I'm sure she would share, Ms. Hazard would share with the schools the resource center, meaning where they can go to get this additional information or to review any of these workshops that you all would have participated in over the past couple of weeks, right? So thank you so much for that recap, Mr. Seerattan. Very tight, very concise. I'm now going to ask you, I mean, I know you said you have your assessment, or I should say assignment, that you would
This
like the students to
activity.
do a little exercise so that they can all get a little practice to start their broadcast news writing, what should I say, journey?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
So as I
hopefully
mentioned,
we'll see them one day in our classrooms to be, you know, as one of your official students. But let's go.
I hope so. I hope so, and I hope I see them in my newsroom later on as well.
Well, even better.
All right. So yes, I'm bringing it. I'm bringing up the press release now. As I mentioned to you before, it's from WASA. So let me just go down to share my screen. Just hold a second. My computer is threatening to not cooperate with me, so I'm being very careful. All right. So let's see if it comes up.
It does. We can see your press release.
Right. So this press release was issued by WASA some time ago. I think it would have been yesterday or day before. So that was the 23rd, so 2 days ago. All right. And it's a very short news release. It's a lot shorter than the ones that I'm used to, rewriting, that is. So it's from WASA, and it's the subject of it is WASA reissues advisory pipeborne water C. All right. So I would like for you to write for me, the instructions are, I would like for you to write for me a 30 to 60 second radio news story, a 30 to 60 second radio news story for me based on this press release that you have in front of you. The only information that you're using is from the press release, is from the news release. Okay? What I encourage you to do, look for the climax, look for the cause, and include the effect. So your stories can be as short as 3 sentences. Your stories can be as short as 3 sentences. If you want to include maybe 2 more sentences, that's fine. But as I encouraged you all earlier, the dramatic unity, you can use it as a formula. So it helps you out in terms of what becomes your first sentence. So you read your press release. What I encourage my students and my reporters to do, you read, don't start writing right away. Don't start writing now. Read your press release from the beginning to the end. Read your press release. Make sure you understand it. And then you begin to craft your story after, using the dramatic unity format. So when I say your story is supposed to be between 30 and 60 seconds, we are looking at anywhere between 90 words. I'm giving you a range because we read at different pace, but I'm giving you a range from between 90 words to 120. So aim for between 90 to 120 words for your story. This is supposed to be really easy. I chose a simple news release for you all. I'm giving you half an hour. I will remain online. I am here looking at the press release, reading it along with you as well. So if you have any questions, if you need any clarification, I'm here for you to answer your questions and to offer that assistance. So good luck.
Mr. Seerattan, I have a question. I am seeing 3 paragraphs. Is that it, or is there something else below?
That's the end of it. That's the end of your press release.
Because I was just seeing like some little writing to the bottom.
Right? It's just
letters. Okay,
Right, so
great.
it's
So
just
no problem.
corporate
That helps.
Yeah, so corporate communications
Sorry, can you
department.
repeat back the instructions?
Yeah, so I'm saying, I'll just repeat it quickly. I'm saying to write a 30 to 60-second radio news story based on the press release that you're seeing on your screen right now. When I say 30 to 60 seconds, try to, your length of your story should be between 90 to 120 words, using the information that you have in the press release. And I'm saying use the dramatic unity structure, use the dramatic unity as a formula, loosely speaking. So you look for the climax in that press release. Look for what has happened. What is the story? Look for the cause in that press release, and look for the effect within that press release as well.
Great. Can we see the top of we're not seeing the headline on top
Right,
of
sure.
it?
So
Just-
so it's
right. So I don't know if we could manage to get it so everything fits on the screen.
yeah, maybe I can try to
I'm
just
seeing, I think we should see everything now. If you go just like a quarter inch up or maybe or so, we could probably, because claims is the actual last word on the thing.
claims is the last word that you're seeing, right?
Right. So if
So
it's possible for you to just go up or maybe just again.
maybe I could also try to reduce the percent, if that would help.
Okay, yeah, maybe just a little. Just
I'm
to
at
make sure that the
100.
students can see everything. So maybe
I'm
go
at 100
130.
and, yeah, well, 130.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay,
All
guys.
right.
So good luck, and I'm
So
here.
it's now 10:43. We will resume, let's say, at 11:15. And if you are ready before that, you can absolutely let us know and we
Yes.
will go, right? But for
Yes.
now, Mr. Seerattan, anything else before I pause the recording?
No, that's it. We'll go over at we'll start correcting. Make sure let the students be prepared to read their material. Remember, it's writing for the air. So I don't want to see what you wrote. I want to hear what you wrote.
Perfect.
And once I hear it, I need to understand it. Okay. So we'll come back at 11:15, as Sophia said. I am remaining on. I am here. I'll just mute my microphone. Yes, if you have any questions, yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to stop recording for now and then we'll resume in 30 minutes.
Yes. Okay, welcome back, you all. Thank you for your participation in the activity. So we're going to have a little structure to how we present. Before you do so, please state your name, and then you can go on to read your story for us. I will offer some brief comments on the story itself. I'll try to be as brief as possible before we move on to ensure we get as many of you as possible. Okay, so and if you want to just unmute and identify yourself, and you can start reading your piece. Who's going first? Don't rush now.
Camellia Gill.
Okay, Camellia, let's hear you.
Trinidad and Tobago's Water and Sewage Authority warns the public against a false and speculative voice note warning people not to drink pipeline water due to potential illnesses. WASA says that the water meets the World Health Organization guidelines and is safe for use. As a result, they have launched an investigation into these claims.
Okay, thanks so much, Camellia. It's a bit wordy, I'll be honest with you. I mean, it's not a bad attempt. Your first try, I think you started off well, where you spoke about WASA making reference to the voice note. But if you had to tell this story to a friend, what was the first thing you will tell them? If you read this press release? So forget writing now. If you read this press release, what would be the first thing you will tell a friend? In a few words, just a few words. It doesn't have to be a full sentence. Just tell me what you would tell a friend.
WASA launching an investigation due to false claims.
about the water supply.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, and that's a shorter, that's a shorter sentence from the one that you gave me. So from the one that you wrote, excuse. So what I would encourage you to do is use that tell a friend, what we call technique. How would you tell this story to a friend? And use that sentence as your first sentence. It's a lot simpler. I'm not going to comment at this stage because we have others to go. I'm not going to comment in terms of the angle that you chose or the first sentence that you're going with. But definitely in speaking to me, it was more digestible. It was easier for me to understand what was happening. It was a shorter sentence, simpler words. And I just felt as though you were talking to me rather than reading something to me. Your first attempt, I knew you were reading. It was not you were talking to me. I know you were reading a piece of material because it sounded like that. It sounded something straight off a piece of paper, right? It didn't sound like a conversation. But when I asked you, tell me what you would tell a friend, then it became conversation. So what I would encourage you to do, as I said before, is use that technique when you're crafting your stories. So you get that first line sounding more conversational in your writing. Okay? So those are my short comments. And thank you, Camelia, for your attempt. Not bad. All right, so who's next? Just state your name and
but like mine's is like really longer than hers.
it's longer. So let's hear it. But what's your name again?
Faith Vicky.
Okay, Faith. Hi, nice to meet you. Could you go ahead and read it? Even though it's longer, that's fine. It's a learning process for your colleagues. So let's hear what you have.
Okay. The Trinidad and Tobago Water and Sewage Authority issues a renewed warning about an old voice note resurfacing on social media. This voice note, previously addressed on March 7, 2022, contains unverified claims cautioning against drinking water. The authority firmly denies these claims as false and speculative. Meticulous water testing ensures supply throughout Trinidad and Tobago meets World Health Organization drinking water quality standards, guaranteeing its safety. An official investigation is now underway to address these claims. The public is urged to rely on credible information and ignore baseless rumors. Further updates will follow.
All right, thanks. So definitely a lot wordier. How many words did you get in your story?
I think it was 90 words.
90, right? Okay. Again, I felt as though I didn't feel the conversational nature of your writing. It felt as though, again, like you were reading something from the newspaper or that you're reading probably from straight off the press release. If I were to ask you, what was the biggest thing? What do you want to share? What was the biggest thing coming out of that news release for you? What stood out?
That there's a rumor going around about the water in the pipe, and that it could cause death or like illness or something like that.
Okay, so there's a rumor about the water supply. Okay, all right. So that's the in other words, that's the climax in your story. That's what you're saying should be the climax.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so could you tell me that in your own words without looking at what you wrote? If you just had to say, there's a rumor going around about the water supply. Could you say that for me, like how you will tell that to someone you know? You don't have to write anything. Just tell me. Pretend you were warning me. Pretend you were warning me about the water supply.
I think I would say it like this, like a rumor is surfacing on a voice note about the water causing health risks. Something like that, sir. I'm not sure, trying to think about it.
Will you tell me to drink the water or don't drink the water?
Well, if it was like I didn't see the article first, I would have said don't drink the water. But like if I saw the article, I would have said don't drink drink the water because WASA did release a statement that is just a rumor going around. It did investigations on it.
Okay. Thanks so much, Faith. So you were saying, you're saying that the first thing you will tell me, just to recap, the first thing you will tell me, just putting aside what you wrote so far, the first thing you will tell me is about the rumor. Yeah. That's the first thing you will say. Just confirming, right, Faith?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so very much. What I like with you all so far is that you're attempting something that, you know, many people don't really get it on their first try, and you all are brave. I'm not hearing anything significantly wrong. It's a matter of polishing what we hear or what I hear to make it just a bit more conversational, because in the both pieces I've heard so far, it's definitely not written for the air, because my memory is already failing me in terms of the details included in those two pieces so far. I heard about a rumor, I heard about an investigation, and that's all I remember so far. Only because of the construction of it, of the story so far. Okay. But at least I got some messages. All right. So who do we have next? We had Camelia and Faith. Vanessa.
Yes.
Okay.
WASA refused the claims made in the old voice note recording and assured customers that the pipeline water supply to the system is safe for use. They regularly sample and test the water to ensure it meets the World Health Organization guidelines for drinking water quality. Customers now can have confidence in the quality and safety of the water provided by WASA.
Okay. Long. First sentence, I got a and in there. Wasn't there an in there?
Yes, sir.
I can't even repeat the first sentence because it's long. So I mentioned during the presentation that whenever you hear that you have to include and in a sentence, chances are maybe you would be going a bit longer than expected, because you're bringing in an extra thought, you're bringing in an additional idea. In broadcast, try to stick to one idea or thought per sentence. I'll go back to the presentation earlier. So the reason I can't remember your first sentence is because that there were two ideas. Could you just read it back for me one more time? I don't have the luxury as a listener to do this if I heard it on the radio, but could I just hear it back one more time to hear the angle that you chose?
WASA refused the claims made in the old voice note recording and assure customers that the pipe-borne water supplied through the system is safe for use.
All right, thanks. Great. I just had one more question for you. What if I did not hear that voice note? In other words, you were telling me that WASA has refuted claims in an old voice note recording. What if I didn't hear that voice note? What if I'm not on WhatsApp or I'm not on social media? What if I'm a pensioner? What if I'm a primary school student and I'm not on social media, I'm not on WhatsApp, and I didn't hear the voice note? What would be my position as a listener? Because you're telling me that WASA is dismissing or disputing or denying claims made in that voice note. What would be my position?
I don't really understand the question.
I'm saying that I wouldn't have anything to go on, meaning you told me that Wasa is denying or disputing the voice note, but I don't know what's the voice note. I didn't hear it. So what are they disputing? What are they dismissing? That's what I'm saying.
That it's safe to drink the water.
That it's safe to drink the water.
Yeah.
But
Because
in the
if nobody didn't make the voice notes on the recording, everybody would have probably just drink the water as usual.
right. So maybe a better angle could have been that Wasa is saying that you can't drink the water they supply
Yeah.
to cater
But
to
it's
the
safe.
yeah, to cater to a wide cross section. Let's just look at a wide cross section. As I said, I didn't receive the voice note, but I want to reach as many people as possible as a broadcast writer. So maybe we could have focused on Wasa saying the water you receive safe to drink,
Yeah.
and then bring in the cause. What caused Wasa to say this, right? So the climax is that the water is safe. But what caused? So the climax is that the cause. Now, what caused Wasa to say this? Well, the voice note, exactly. So that's what I was telling you guys earlier, that if you use the dramatic unity, it actually gives you a formula. So the climax is, just using you as an example. I'm not saying that is the climax. I'm just using that as an example because I think you mentioned that in the end of your sentence that it was safe. So let's just use the water being safe to drink. That's your climax. The cause of that is obviously because the cause of Wasa's making this statement or giving this assurance is because of the voice note that was warning about water being unsafe. Right? So automatically you have another sentence for your story, your broadcast story, and then maybe we could have looked at another sentence or another line for your effect. So that's how you would apply that dramatic unity structure to your writing, to your broadcast writing, and it simplifies everything. Okay.
Yes.
I hope that my comments are helpful so far and that you all are seeing how to break things down, how to simplify it, rather than just your story sounding as though it's being read off a piece of paper, it's being read off a press release, it's being read off a newspaper. That's definitely not the route that we want to go. We want to sound as though we're having a conversation with our listeners. Now, just like the example I gave following Vanessa's presentation, where I said, well, she wanted to say that the water is safe because she had that in the first line. She just had the second idea in her first line. So why not just start off with that? Because if you mention a voice note, what are people who didn't? What about people who did not hear? What about people who did not hear that voice note? They wonder, well, what is this person talking about? But if we all receive a water supply, I mean, should receive a water supply regularly. What about people who did not get that voice note? We need to cater to a lot of people, and chances are the majority of people would want to know about their water supply. So if you tell them that their water supply is safe, you automatically grab their attention. They want to hear more. Well, why is the story or issue about my water supply in the news? Why the reporter or newscaster is saying that the water is safe? What caused this? Why? And then you give the details for the rest of the story. So that's my recommendation following Vanessa's presentation. Anybody else wants to go? Who else? Anybody? You do a sample. I'll do a sample because I don't think how many students do we have on? I don't know if I'll be able to complete everyone, but I'll take like a sample, maybe 5 or 7 students. I have 3 so far. Maybe we can do it 5, and or if Sophia would allow, we can go with maybe 2 more, maybe 7, and then I can give you my closing comments on it.
Certainly,
Right,
I think time would permit.
5, yeah.
We have almost half hour, so I think we should be good for time.
Right. So I'll take 2 more. I'll take 2 more. And yes. So good morning. Who are we hearing from today?
Dan Maharaj from Ulamtul Secondary.
Say that name again.
Dan Maharaj from Ulamtul Secondary.
Okay, Maraj, right? Yes.
There's a whole voice note you circulated on social media that advises customers and members to be aware of the false allegations. Water and Sewage Authority wishes to remind its customers that regular testing is conducted to ensure quality service.
That's it?
Yes.
Okay, could you go over that one more time with me again? Could you just read it over again?
There's an old voice note circulating on social media that advises customers and members to be aware of the false allegations circulating on social media. The Water and Sewage Authority wishes to remind its customers that regular testing is conducted to ensure quality service.
All right. So you chose as your climax to state that the old voice note, that an old voice note is circulated on social media. That's your climax. That's
Yes.
what you chose. Yeah?
Yes. Yes.
And then you went in the second line that WASA is saying that that's not the case. That's correct, right?
Yes.
Okay. So tell me why you chose to mention that a voice note is in circulation as your first sentence.
That's the main point. That's
the
main point.
Is the main thing.
Yes.
Wouldn't the main thing be what WASA's response to that voice note would be? Think about it. The voice note is already circulating. We know that is known because WASA has now responded to it. In other words, the latest thing that we have at our disposal is WASA's response, because there was a voice note earlier. So the question that I have is that why something that came before WASA's response is now the newest piece of information? Why is that your climax? Shouldn't WASA's response be the climax? Because what has happened? WASA is now responding to something. So in other words, you took us back to the voice note, not the response of WASA. Did I go too quickly there?
Yes.
So
point taken.
Yeah. So how you should have started would have been WASA's response to the voice note. In other words, what you were telling me would have been all news. It would not have been news because we already know, or WASA already knows, or members of the public know that a voice note is in circulation. So by broadcasting that to me, that's no news for me. What I need to know, because I already received the voice note on my phone, what I need to know is WASA's response. So if I heard your newscast, if I heard that an old voice note is in circulation warning of the water being unsafe, or warning of false information, as you said, I wouldn't want to listen to that anymore, because I will tell myself as a listener, station presenting old information for me. I already know this. I already received the voice. What was WASA's response? But guess what? I already changed the station. I didn't know that WASA was coming up. I didn't know you was going to tell me WASA's response in your second or third line. So my advice is, and again, this is a learning process for all of us. My response is, my point is, if you're starting a story, start with the climax, start with the newest, freshest piece of information that you have. Start with the response to the issue. Don't start with the issue, start with the response to the issue, because we already know the issue. We want the response. So my advice again would be, begin with what WASA has to say, or what WASA said, or what was WASA's response. That would be my advice in crafting a story, because news is supposed to be new. So the first sentence, give your listener something new. Okay? I hope my comments were helpful to everyone. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 so far. Is there anyone who wants to go to be the last, but certainly not least? Could I have another person?
I'm Taylor Vera from Williams II. Tia Lavera from Williamson Secretary.
I didn't get the name again. If Sophia can help me out with some. Could you put it in the chat? Could you just put it in the chat and I'll get it, and you can go ahead.
Okay, just
Tia. Okay, great. Thank you. So Tia, let's hear your contribution.
okay. The Water and Sewage Attorney is advising the public of an old voice recording, which is now recirculating through social media. The public is again advised that this misleading voice recording is invalid, and WASA advised the public that the drinking water is completely fine due to the constant testing. That's it.
So definitely short. And again, you chose to, like some of your colleagues before, to go with the angle that WASA is advising of the circulation of this old recording. That's what you chose as the climax, as your lead or first sentence, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Could you read your second line for me again, if that's possible? I hope it's not too much to ask. Tia, are you with us?
The second line was,
Second sentence, yeah. You with us, Tia? We have lost Tia.
sorry, what was that?
Yeah, I'm asking if you could read your second sentence for me again, if it's not too much to ask. That's possible?
Yes. WASA advises the public that the drinking water is completely fine due to the constant testing.
Okay. All right, great. So your second sentence, you think that's important? You think that's less important than the voice note circulating, or more important?
I think it's more important because being known to the public that the water is completely fine to consume is better than knowing that an old voice note is being circulated through the internet. That is false information. It's better to know you have safer options than know about something that wasn't really true.
Right. So thank you very much, and that sums up what I wanted to say at the end of all of this, right? What's the most important thing? What's the climax in this? Is that you want to tell people that the water is safe. You don't want to tell them that a voice note is circulating, because that's not adding value to their life in any way. How can they use that information? How can they use the information that a voice note or that an old voice note is circulating? They can't use that information readily. So if you start off your story by saying a voice note is in circulation, or the WASA is warning about a voice note, I'm none the wiser. I can't take any action. I can't make an informed decision by just telling. As a listener, I can't make an informed decision by just hearing that a voice note is in circulation. But I can make an informed decision if I hear that the water supply is safe. And that's what this story is about. That's what that press release is about. WASA sent an entire press release to say, look, if you want to break it down in layman terms, that here's what we want to tell you, the public, that the water is safe. Why we are telling you the water is safe is because there is this misleading or false voice note. We are investigating this voice note, but just to tell you, our water meets international standards. Did I cover everything that was said in that press release, or did I miss anything? One, your water is safe.
Yes, but that's fine.
Two, there is a voice note in circulation that's false. Three, we, WASA, we are investigating it, but our water meets international standards. I'm just breaking down the press release into bare bones. Did I forget anything?
No, sir, it was completely covered.
Great. And that's what you guys should aim to do. And I made it conversational because it's what I will tell a relative or a friend if I get a press release that, look, it's safe to drink your water, you know. I'm just going vernacular and colloquial. It's safe to drink your water. Despite that voice note, what's to say? Their water meets the international standard. And that's what you want to tell your public. That's all that you want to tell your public, right? So I attempted the press release in like a few minutes before the presentation because I felt as though I wanted you all to see, you know, how to just break it down as well. So I attempted that the press release, and the first or the climax that I went with would have been telling the population or telling my listeners that your water supply is safe. It's the first thing I told them. And I said the assurance, let me just see if I could share my screen. If it's not participating with me, then I regret. But so I started by saying that your water supply is safe, or that your pipe-borne water supply is safe to drink. That's what I told the public. The assurance comes from the Water and Sewerage Authority, WASA. That was my second line. It says an old voice note warning about the safety of water is false. WASA says it has launched an investigation into the matter. However, it says its water supply meets World Health Organization standards. That was my story. Did it sound as though I was reading for you guys, or did it sound as though I was conversing or talking to you?
It sounds as though you are conversant to this.
Yeah. So that's how you transform a press release into something conversational for broadcast. You break it down, you apply that formula, right? You look for the climax in this being that the water is safe. And the cause of you saying that, or the cause of WASA saying that, is that there was this voice note. So that's your cause. And then the effect obviously will be the effect of WASA obviously launching an investigation, but saying that, look, our water meets the WHO standard. I mean, if I could shorten World Health Organization to WHO. You covered the entire press release in, I think mine, I believe that my story was maybe 90 words, if I could, let me just see if I could share it here. And are you seeing that? Right, so 60 words.
Yes, we can see it.
Right, so it's 60 words, and I covered every single thing in that press release. And look at the length of the sentences. Short sentences, simple words. I didn't say your pipe-borne water is safe for consumption, because we wouldn't say that if we're talking. It's safe to drink. And that assurance comes from the people who are in charge of the water supply, WASA. Why is WASA telling us this? What's the cause of this? Is that there's an old voice note warning people not to drink from their supply. Right? And obviously WASA is investigating the situation, and WASA is giving a further assurance that, look, yes, we are saying it's safe, but it's so safe that it meets the World Health Organization standards. And that's how you can break down that press release. Make it conversational, make it short sentences, simple words. All right, any questions or comments, you guys? I hope today's session was helpful. I hope you learned a thing or two or more, and that you can implement some of what was covered today in your writing.
It was
Thank you
very
again.
helpful, rather straightforward, and I really like this topic as an English student from the English department. It was really nice.
Great. I'm happy to hear that. And thank you, Siparia West Secondary School students who sent the message on the chat. It was indeed a pleasure being here. And I hope to hear from you guys soon. Thank you again for your attention.